In the ruins of Gaza City, where shattered concrete meets the dust of unending war, a new political storm is brewing. As regional powers push for a ceasefire and reconstruction, Hamas has drawn a red line, refusing to commit to disarmament. Their message is clear: not now, not under these conditions. The statement, delivered by senior Hamas Politburo member Mohammed Nazzal, has sent ripples through the fragile peace process, threatening to derail months of painstaking diplomacy led by Washington, Cairo and Doha. Nazzal's words, "Hamas cannot commit to disarmament under the current circumstances," underscore one of the thorniest questions facing Gaza's future. Who will control the guns when the smoke clears? For 2 years, Gaza has lived in a cycle of destruction and reconstruction. The conflict reignited after the October 7th, 2023 Hamas attacks on Israel left over 35,000 Palestinians dead and much of the enclave reduced to rubble. Israel's military campaign, driven by its pledge to eliminate Hamas, displaced more than 1.5 million people. In 2025, under pressure from the United States, Israel, Egypt and Qatar, negotiators revived a 20-point ceasefire and reconstruction plan, often called the Trump-brokered Gaza Peace Plan. The roadmap promises phased reconstruction, prisoner exchanges and, crucially, the demilitarization of Gaza. At the heart of the plan lies an American guarantee: aid, investment and recognition for Palestinians, but only if Hamas lays down its weapons. That's the deal Washington has put on the table. But in Gaza, Hamas says the reality is far more complicated. In an exclusive interview with Reuters, Mohammed Nazzal explained the group's position bluntly: "We will not make a commitment to disarmament under the current circumstances. It depends on the nature of the project. To whom will the weapons be handed over?" The message reflects both defiance and calculation. Hamas knows that disarmament is the cornerstone of Israel's demands, yet surrendering arms would strip it of power, legitimacy and leverage. Nazzal added that Hamas intends to maintain security responsibility for Gaza during the interim phase of any transition. In other words, Hamas plans to stay in charge of local policing and security, at least until a permanent arrangement is defined. Another senior figure, Dr. Abd al-Jabbar Saeed, reinforced this view, warning that immediate disarmament would create widespread chaos in Gaza. Without a sovereign Palestinian state to assume control, he said, removing weapons now would lead to lawlessness and insecurity. "We are not refusing peace," he told Middle East Monitor, "but disarming before the occupation ends and before a legitimate authority exists would be reckless. The resistance protects Gaza from collapse to Hamas. Weapons are not merely tools of war. They are symbols of resistance, survival and sovereignty. The decision is strategic, not spontaneous. For Hamas, disarmament without political guarantees would be suicide." The group argues that Gaza remains under occupation. Israel still controls its airspace, waters and crossings. It says any talk of disarmament must come after the establishment of a recognized Palestinian state with a unified national army. Moreover, Hamas fears a power vacuum. If its fighters surrender weapons today, who will police the streets tomorrow? The interim administration proposed by the US, a technocratic council backed by Egypt and Qatar, has not yet taken shape and its authority remains unclear. "We cannot leave Gaza defenseless," said Nazzal. "Security must stay in local hands until a legitimate Palestinian government exists." The statement also reflects internal politics. Within Hamas, the military wing has long dominated over the political bureau. Any hint of capitulation could fracture the movement and embolden rivals like Palestinian Islamic Jihad or armed clans that operate independently in Gaza's refugee camps. Hamas's leaders are therefore balancing two battles at once, one with Israel, another within their own ranks. The tension between disarmament and resistance is not new. In 2014, after the last major Gaza war, Israel and Egypt demanded that Hamas disband its military wing as part of a reconstruction deal. Hamas refused then too, arguing that Israel's blockade and occupation made resistance a right, not a choice. In April 2025, before the latest ceasefire push, Hamas had offered a 5 to 7 year truce, but again insisted it would not disarm. "The weapon of resistance is not negotiable and will remain in our hands as long as the occupation exists," a Hamas spokesperson told Reuters at the time. That statement still defines the movement's ideology. From Hamas's perspective, every ceasefire is temporary until statehood is achieved. Disarmament, therefore, equals surrender, and surrender equals political extinction. The refusal to disarm poses a direct challenge to Washington's blueprint for peace. US mediators had hoped that a phased demilitarization, monitored by an international force, could begin by year's end. That timeline now looks unrealistic. Israel's security establishment views the issue as non-negotiable. A senior Israeli defense official told Reuters, "Without demilitarization, the entire deal collapses." In Gaza, however, local sentiment appears divided. Some civilians, exhausted by war, say they want Hamas to hand over weapons if it guarantees peace and reconstruction. Others fear that giving up arms would invite chaos or Israeli reoccupation. "Without the resistance, who will protect us?" asked Salim, a mother of 3 living in Khan Yunis. "We have no army, no borders, no freedom. Only these fighters stand between us and destruction." That dilemma between peace and protection is now at the heart of Gaza's debate. Regional mediators are scrambling to keep the process alive. Egyptian and Qatari envoys met Hamas representatives in Doha this week, urging them to reconsider. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan called for a security framework that does not humiliate any side. At the United Nations, diplomats warn that the peace plan could unravel if disarmament talks fail. UN Under-Secretary General Tom Fletcher, speaking earlier this month, said, "Peace cannot be imposed by force. Stability in Gaza will come only through legitimate governance and trust, but trust is in short supply. Neither side believes the other will honor the next step." The US still believes disarmament is possible, but privately, diplomats admit that a partial disarmament or staged weapons control might be the only realistic outcome. As the talks continue, Gaza stands at a crossroads. Its people dream of reconstruction and return, of homes rebuilt, schools reopened, and power restored. But beneath the rubble lies a deeper question. Can Gaza ever find peace while its most powerful faction insists that the gun must stay loaded? In Part 2, we examine the broader stakes, the consequences of refusal, the risks of collapse, and the fragile hope for compromise that still flickers amid the ruins. The talks in Doha and Cairo have entered what one diplomat calls the paralysis phase. Each side repeats the same conditions. Israel demands full disarmament before reconstruction funds are released. Hamas demands reconstruction and sovereignty before disarmament. Caught between them are international mediators, juggling security guarantees, economic incentives, and humanitarian aid. The latest US draft proposes that Hamas surrender heavy weaponry like rockets and drones while retaining light arms for internal security during a 12-month transition period. So far, Hamas has not accepted even that compromise. American negotiators worry that if progress stalls before December, Israel may act unilaterally, re-entering Gaza to complete unfinished business. The ceasefire may still hold on paper, but on the ground, mistrust is tightening its grip. In Gaza's streets, power is fragmented. Local police answer to Hamas's interior ministry, while armed brigades guard their own sectors. Human rights groups warn that without a clear chain of command, Gaza could slide into chaos. A European Union security advisor involved in the ceasefire plan told Reuters, "Disarmament without governance is a recipe for anarchy, but governance without disarmament is a guarantee of instability." That paradox defines the current stalemate. If Hamas keeps its arms, Israel refuses to withdraw troops from border zones. If Hamas disarms, rival groups could seize control or criminal networks could flourish. For ordinary Gazans, it's a no-win situation. Israel's position remains uncompromising. Officials say demilitarization is non-negotiable and must precede reconstruction. Netanyahu's cabinet has approved a conditional reopening of Gaza crossings only after verified arms disposal. Military analysts note, however, that Israel faces a dilemma of its own. A forced disarmament campaign could reignite urban warfare and international condemnation. A lenient approach could allow Hamas to regroup and rearm. Some Israeli security experts now favor a multinational stabilization force involving Egypt, Jordan, and possibly NATO countries to supervise Gaza's borders and internal security, effectively bypassing Hamas without plunging the enclave into anarchy. But even that idea requires Hamas's acquiescence, which it has so far withheld. Beyond the politics and weapons, there is the human story. After 2 years of siege and bombardment, Gaza's infrastructure is in ruins. According to UN OCHA, over 70% of homes have been destroyed or severely damaged. Hospitals operate at a fraction of capacity. Clean water remains scarce. For most Gazans, survival outweighs ideology. We are tired of slogans, says Mahmoud Khalil, a teacher displaced from Rafah. If laying down the guns brings peace, do it. If keeping them keeps us safe, do that. Just stop the dying. This exhaustion is shaping public opinion and may eventually pressure Hamas's leadership to reconsider its stance, or at least to redefine what disarmament means. In Ankara and Doha, regional backers are quietly recalibrating. Turkey's foreign ministry now promotes what it calls a phased security handover. Hamas keeps small arms temporarily, then integrates into a unified Palestinian security force overseen by Arab states. Egypt prefers a comprehensive disarmament plan with international monitors, warning that Gaza's instability could spill into Sinai. Qatar, which hosts much of Hamas's political bureau, urges flexibility but faces US pressure to use its influence. Even Iran, a longtime Hamas supporter, has publicly called for strategic patience, hinting that military confrontation now would be counterproductive. These shifts suggest a regional appetite for de-escalation, but none of it will matter unless Hamas itself moves from rejection to negotiation. Analysts see three plausible outcomes. Scenario 1, conditional disarmament. Hamas agrees to surrender heavy weapons in exchange for international recognition, reconstruction aid, and a political role in Gaza's new government. This could stabilize the ceasefire, but would require unprecedented trust. Scenario 2, stalemate and fragmentation. Hamas keeps its weapons, Israel maintains partial blockade, reconstruction limps forward through UN agencies and NGOs. Peace remains frozen, but open war is avoided. Scenario 3, collapse and renewal of conflict. Talks fail entirely, Israel resumes military operations, Hamas retaliates, civilian suffering deepens. This is the nightmare scenario the world is racing to prevent. Most diplomats privately expect a blend of the first two, a fragile arrangement that buys time but resolves little. The debate also exposes a conceptual gap. When mediators say disarmament, they mean total surrender of weapons. When Hamas says it won't commit to disarmament, it means it won't surrender unconditionally. Some Palestinian analysts argue the two sides might meet halfway through integration, not destruction. That could mean Hamas's fighters are absorbed into a future Palestinian national security force, similar to the way militias were integrated after Lebanon's civil war. It would allow Hamas to claim it did not surrender, while allowing Israel to claim Gaza is demilitarized. Whether such linguistic diplomacy can overcome decades of distrust is another matter. As night falls over Gaza, the silhouettes of its ruins stand against a darkening sky, a reminder of wars that promised peace but delivered none. Hamas's refusal to disarm may appear obstinate, but to its leaders, it is existential. To Israel, it is unacceptable. To Washington, it is an obstacle that must be overcome, somehow, somewhere, before the next explosion shatters the fragile calm. The question now is not only whether Hamas will disarm, but what kind of peace can exist if it doesn't. Until that question is answered, Gaza remains trapped between past and future, between the silence of a ceasefire and the echo of the next war. Peace will not come through pressure alone, said a UN diplomat this week. It will come when both sides believe they have something left to protect. And in Gaza, for now, that protection still comes from the barrel of a gun.